I played an innocent wife while cheating for years. Now husband is making sure everyone sees my lies. Hello everyone, it's Chloe here, and I have been in a lot of mess as of late, and I'm here to lay them all out. I'm 33 years old and I've been married for 9 years. I've got 2 kids who are my world, even if they drive me up the wall most times. For years I thought I had this lying thing down to an art. Like if I tilted my head just right or let my eyes get a little watery, people would buy whatever I was selling. And for a long time, they did. I had a good job as an office manager, a solid marriage on the outside, and this dimpled smile that could charm the socks off anyone. And the people at church, they ate it up. They'd call me sweetheart like it was stitched on my forehead. And I guess I was so good at pretending that no one ever thought there was more to me and nobody ever dug deeper. I guess that's the thing about being the quiet, put-together woman. Nobody expects you to make a mess. But I was making a mess. A big one. I sang in the church choir every Sunday, and I'd volunteer in the kids section whenever they needed an extra hand. It wasn't because I loved it or anything. It was convenient. Those things gave me a free pass. My husband, Matt, never questioned where I was going half the time. He'd just nod when I said I was headed to church or had a meeting with the choir director. He trusted me. And why wouldn't he? I was the perfect wife, the perfect mom, the perfect Christian lady who brought casseroles to potlucks and never missed a service. But the truth is, I'd show up to church, do the bare minimum, and then slip out the side door. I wasn't going to pray or plan Sunday school lessons. I was meeting someone. I know what you're thinking. How could I? And I don't have a good answer. I just did it because I was bitter. Deep down, I hated my life. I hated being married. I hated how Matt would leave dishes in the sink like I was his personal maid. I hated how our kids, Lily and Ethan, would scream and cry like the world was ending over a spilled juice box. I hated how my in-laws were always in our business, dropping by unannounced with their opinions about how I should raise my kids or what kind of hair I should make. And don't get me started on church. Everyone there expected me to be this shining example of a godly woman, always smiling, always serving. It was suffocating. And the only time I felt like I could breathe, like I was actually alive, was when I was with someone else, someone who wasn't Matt. You know, at the beginning of my infidelity, which was a long time ago. Yeah, I'd been cheating on my husband for years. Anyways, I'd tell Matt I was running errands or meeting a friend, and he'd never ask for details. I got good at covering my tracks. I'd use cash instead of cards, delete messages, and always had an alibi ready. At first it was strangers, guys I'd meet online or when I was out of town for work. I'd drive an hour or two, check into a cheap motel, and for a few hours, I wasn't Chloe the wife or Chloe the mom. I was just me, or at least the version of me that didn't feel like she was drowning. I told myself it didn't hurt anyone. Matt didn't know, the kids didn't know, and those guys didn't care. It was just a transaction, no strings, no feelings. But then things got messy. About 6 months ago, Matt's cousin Jake moved back to town. He'd been overseas for years, working some fancy job in tech, and when he came back, he needed a place to crash until he found an apartment. Matt, being the good guy he is, offered our guest room. I didn't think much of it at first. Jake was family, and I barely remembered him from when we were kids. But when he showed up at our front door, I noticed him, like really noticed him. He was tall, with this easy smile and eyes that lingered a little too long, and he was nothing like Matt. Where Matt was predictable and comfortable, Jake was exciting, dangerous even. Jake settled in, and it didn't take long for things to shift. He was so helpful around the house. He'd fix the leaky faucet, play with the kids so I could have a break, and even cook dinner a few times. He'd tease me about my terrible taste in music, or make me laugh when I was stressed. And sometimes we would steal glances at each other. And the thing is, those glances weren't so innocent. I'd catch him watching me while I was folding laundry, and I'd feel this heat creep up my neck. I knew it was wrong. He was Matt's cousin, for crying out loud. But knowing something's wrong and stopping yourself are two different things. One afternoon, while Matt was at work, the kids were at school, and Jake and I were alone in the house. I needed help getting a box of Christmas decorations down from a high shelf in the garage. I could have waited for Matt, but I didn't. Instead, I asked Jake. He came out, reached up, and grabbed the box like it was nothing. Our hands brushed when he handed it to me, and neither of us pulled away. We just stood there, inches apart, and I could hear my heart pounding. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly we were kissing, and then we were stumbling back into the house, clothes hitting the floor before we even made it to the guest room. When it was over, I felt this mix of guilt and relief, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally let it out. But the guilt hit harder than usual. This wasn't some random guy in a motel. This was Jake. He lived in our house, ate breakfast with my kids. He was family. I sat up, pulled the sheet around me, and told him that absolutely no one could know about this. No one. He just nodded, like he got it, but there was this look in his eyes I couldn't read. The next few weeks were torture. Jake didn't move out, and I didn't ask him to. We acted normal around Matt and the kids, but every time we were alone, it was like the air was electric. I told myself it was a one-time thing, but I was lying again. It happened again. And again. Each time I'd tell him it was the last time, but I didn't mean it. I couldn't stop. It wasn't just about the thrill anymore. Yeah, if you think that was bad, buckle up because it got worse. Way worse. Soon enough, Jake moved out of our house, and I honestly thought I'd be free from the temptation. Like if I didn't see him every day, I'd go back to being good old Chloe, the sweet wife and mom everyone loved. But that's not what happened. I was kind of relieved because not seeing Jake's face at breakfast or hearing him laugh with my kids made it easier to pretend nothing happened. But the bitterness was still there. I hated how Lily and Ethan would fight over stupid things like who got the bigger pancake. I hated how my in-laws would drop by with their fake smiles, acting like they knew what was best for my family. Church was the worst. All those expectations, all that pressure to be perfect, it was choking me. So to keep myself from suffocating, of course Jake and I didn't stop. I thought we would, but we didn't. Whenever we ran into each other, it was like a switch flipped. I'd sometimes see him at the grocery store or when he came by to pick up something he'd left at our house. We'd chat, laugh, and then end up in his car. I told myself it was just physical, that it didn't mean anything. But it was more than that. Jake made me feel alive, like I wasn't just a mom or a wife or a choir girl. He saw the real me, or at least the me I wanted to be. And I couldn't let that go. Things got reckless fast. One day, we were at a big family function at Matt's parents' house. It was a sunny Saturday, and the whole family was there. I was in the kitchen, helping cook, and even baking a cake because I found out it was Matt's nephew's birthday. Everyone kept saying how kind I was, how hardworking, how I always went the extra mile. I soaked it up, smiling and nodding, but inside I was rolling my eyes. They didn't know me, not really. Then I saw Jake across the room. He winked at me and bit his lower lip, and my whole body lit up. I knew I should have ignored it, but I didn't. I wanted him, right then and there. I told the women in the kitchen I'd set the oven timer for the cake, and they should pull it out when it went off. Then I said I needed to grab something from the store real quick. Nobody blinked. They just nodded and kept chopping vegetables. I found Jake outside and asked him to drive me. He didn't ask questions. We got in his car, and instead of heading to the store, he drove to a quiet spot behind an old warehouse a few blocks away. We didn't talk. We just parked, climbed into the back seat, and had car sex. It was fast and messy, but it was exactly what I needed. When we were finished and we were pulling our clothes back on, something happened that nearly gave me a heartache. Another car pulled up beside us. I froze. It was Matt's brother, Alec. He honked and my heart stopped. Thank God we were already dressed and Jake's windows were tinted. Jake rolled down the window just enough to talk, and when Alec asked what we were doing, Jake lied smooth as butter, said we were waiting for a friend who needed a ride. Alec didn't seem suspicious. He just waved and drove off. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and said that was too close. Jake laughed, but I could tell he was shaken up too. We drove back to the party, and I slid right back into my role, smiling, serving cake, acting like nothing happened. Nobody suspected a thing. That should have been a wake-up call, but it wasn't. If anything, it made me bolder. Jake and I kept hooking up whenever we could. His car, my car, even motels when Matt was out of town. But it wasn't just Jake. I sometimes branched out. There was this guy at work, Derek, who'd always flirted with me. One day, we were working late on a project, and one thing led to another. We hooked up in the office after everyone else left. It happened a couple more times after that, usually in his car during lunch breaks. I told myself it was no big deal. Derek was single, and nobody got hurt. Then there were the random guys. I'd go to bars an hour or two out of town, places where nobody knew me. I'd have a drink, chat up some guy, and end up in his truck or a cheap hotel room. Sometimes it was strangers I met at the mall. I'd be shopping for clothes or picking up something for the kids, and I'd catch some guy's eye. We would smile at each other, and all it took was a little flirting, and next thing I knew, we were meeting up later. It was so easy, too easy, and every time I'd come home, kiss my kids goodnight, and act like nothing happened. The whole time, everyone thought I was an angel. At church, they'd praise me for my voice in the choir or thank me for helping with the kids' program. At work, my boss called me reliable and gave me a raise. I'd cook dinner, help the kids with homework, and play the perfect wife. But inside, I was screaming. I hated my life. I hated the routine, the expectations, the way everyone thought they knew me. Hooking up was my escape. It was the only thing that made me feel like I was in control. I got good at lying. I had a second phone I kept hidden in my car for texts and calls. I used different apps to chat with guys, ones Matt didn't know about. I'd pay for everything in cash, so there'd be no paper trail, and I always had an excuse ready. Choir practice ran late. I had to help a friend with something. The kids needed new shoes, so I went to the mall. Nobody questioned me. Why would they? I was Chloe, the sweet one, the one who couldn't hurt a fly. But it wasn't sustainable. Deep down, I knew it. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what would happen if Matt found out. Would he leave me? And would he take the kids? I would think about what everyone at church would think of me. And after maybe an hour or so of entertaining such thoughts, I pushed them away, but they kept creeping back. And yet I didn't stop. I couldn't. It was like I was addicted to the rush, to the secret, to the feeling of being someone else for a few hours. One day, I was at the mall, flirting with a guy I'd just met in the food court. He was cute, funny, and didn't ask too many questions. We were making plans to meet up later when I saw someone I knew from church. She waved at me and I waved back, my stomach dropping. I made up some excuse to the guy and left, but it shook me. I realized how close I was to getting caught, but instead of stopping, I just got more careful. I started driving farther out of town using fake names, avoiding places where I might run into someone I knew. I was still going through the motions, keeping up my perfect Chloe facade. But then, one Sunday, everything changed. I was up in the choir loft, singing my heart out, when I noticed a new face in the congregation. He was tall, handsome, with dark hair and a smile that hit me like a lightning bolt. I couldn't stop staring. He was sitting near the back, flipping through a hymn book, and every time he looked up, I felt my pulse race. I knew I shouldn't, but I wanted to know him. After the service, I made a beeline for him. Matt and the kids never waited for me after church because I always stayed late, chatting with people or pretending to have meetings. That day was no different. They left, and I was free to do what I wanted. I walked up to the guy and introduced myself, welcoming him to our church. He said his name was Jeremiah, and his voice was warm, like he was genuinely happy to be there. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned he'd just moved to town for a job. He was easy to talk to, and I felt that familiar spark. I didn't want to let it go, so I did something reckless. I went to the church office and snooped through the newcomer forms in the welfare basket. Nobody was around, so it was easy to find his. From the hospital form, I found out that Jeremiah was 29 years old. He was single, or at least not married. He was working at a restaurant downtown. I memorized his number and slipped the form back before anyone noticed. The next morning, I called him and said I was doing follow-up for the church, asking how he liked the service and if he had any questions. He was polite, maybe a little shy, but I kept the conversation going. I asked about his job, his hobbies, and before long, I had a pretty good picture of his life. He worked at this cozy little restaurant a few blocks from my office, and I decided I'd show up there, just to see him. No harm in that. The next day I went for lunch. He was my server, and when he saw me, his face lit up. I flirted hard, leaning in when I talked, laughing at his jokes, brushing his hand when he handed me the menu. He flirted back, and it felt like a game I was winning. Or at least I thought he was flirting. I had no idea he was just being nice and being friendly. That Sunday, he was at church again. I couldn't keep my eyes off him. I was supposed to be focusing on the hymns, but I kept glancing his way, catching his eye. He smiled back, and my stomach flipped. After the service, I found him in the fellowship hall sipping coffee. I offered to give him a ride home, saying it was on my way. He hesitated but said yes. I drove him to his apartment, a small place in a quiet part of town. We talked the whole way, and I felt that pull again, that need to feel something other than trapped. When we pulled up to his place, he thanked me and started to get out. I don't know what came over me, but I got out of the car, walked around to his side, and kissed him. He suddenly became rigid and motionless, clearly shocked. The kiss was quick but electric, and when it ended, he just stared at me, speechless. Before he could say anything, he mumbled something about needing to go and hurried into his building. I stood there, my heart pounding, feeling alive and terrified all at once. And then I heard someone call my name. I turned and my blood ran cold. It was Matt, standing across the street with Jake and our kids, Lily and Ethan, looking at me like they'd seen a ghost. I couldn't move. Turns out, Jeremiah was Jake's neighbor. Matt and the kids had gone to visit Jake after church, something I didn't know because I'd never gone to his new place. I always met Jake somewhere else, somewhere secret. But there they were, staring at me, and I knew they'd seen everything. Matt's face was a mix of shock and betrayal. Jake looked uncomfortable, and the kids just seemed confused. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run, but I was rooted to the spot, my lips still tingling from the kiss, my mind racing for an excuse that wouldn't come. I tried to play it off. I walked over, and I forced a smile, and saying I was just dropping off a new church member. Matt didn't say anything, just took the kids' hands and walked back to Jake's apartment. Jake wouldn't meet my eyes. I drove home to a bar where I had a drink and kept rethinking everything. I went home hours later, and my hands were shaking on the wheel. When I got there, Matt was already home. He didn't scream. He just asked me to tell him the truth. I lied again, telling him it was nothing, just a friendly gesture, and Jeremiah was new in town and needed a friend. Matt didn't believe me. He said he was done, that he couldn't keep doing this. He packed a bag and left that night. The days after were a blur. I kept up my routine, going to church, singing in the choir, smiling at everyone who called me sweetheart. But it was different now. People were whispering. I caught the pastor's wife giving me a funny look, and some of the other choir members stopped inviting me to coffee. I don't know if Matt told anyone, but word was spreading. Small towns are like that. You can't hide forever. I kept telling myself I could fix it, that I could charm my way out like always. But it wasn't working. Matt wouldn't answer my calls, and the kids kept asking why Daddy wasn't home. I told them he was working late, but I could see they didn't believe me. I stopped seeing Jeremiah, not because I wanted to, but because he avoided me. He didn't come back to church, and when I went by the restaurant, he wasn't there. I heard he'd quit and moved away. Jake stopped coming around too. I think he was ashamed, or maybe he was just done with the drama. I couldn't blame him, but I didn't stop my other hookups. I kept meeting guys, kept chasing that feeling of freedom, even though it was riskier now. I was careless, texting guys on my secret phone when I should have been more discreet, sneaking out when I knew Matt might be watching. I told myself I deserved it, that I'd been a good wife for so long, and this was my reward, but I can feel my marriage creeping to an end, and I don't know how to save it. I don't even know if I want to save it. I just don't want to lose my family. Update. A few weeks after the Jeremiah incident, I told myself I'd try to change. I told myself I'd focus on fixing things with Matt. He was still living at home, but it was like we were strangers. He'd talk to the kids, help with dinner, but he barely looked at me. His silence was worse than yelling. I could feel him judging me, waiting for me to screw up again. And I hated it. I hated how my kids seemed to know something was off, and how everyone at church was starting to whisper. The gossip was spreading, and I wasn't sweetheart Chloe anymore, but I kept up the act. I sang in the choir, helped with Sunday school, smiled through it all like nothing was wrong. Deep down, I was falling apart. I felt like I was losing myself. Every day was the same: wake up, get the kids to school, go to work, cook, clean, go to church, repeat. It was like I was stuck in a loop. I wasn't happy. I felt trapped. I tried. I went to church more, prayed harder, played with my kids, even tried talking to Matt about our marriage. But it didn't help. I was still bitter, still angry, still desperate for something to make me feel alive again. So when I ran into Tyler at the mall, It was like a switch flipped. Tyler was one of the guys I'd hooked up with before, someone I met at a bar a couple towns over. I was there buying new shoes for Ethan, and there he was, standing by the food court with that same cocky grin. We didn't need much talk. A few words, a knowing look, and we were sneaking off to a dark corner of the parking garage. We started stripping, and before I knew it, we were having sex right there, pressed against the wall. It was fast and reckless, and it lit me up. For those few minutes, I wasn't drowning in my life. I was free. When we finished, I was so caught up in the thrill that I told Tyler I wanted to meet up again the next day. He said he'd call, and I drove home feeling like I'd stolen a piece of myself back. But when I walked into the house, my heart sank. The living room was full of people from church. The pastor was there, along with some choir members and a few of the older ladies who always ran the bake sales. Matt was sitting on the couch, looking calm. He said he'd invited them over for a little fellowship, something we used to do before. I had no idea because Matt and I weren't exactly chatting about our plans anymore. I forced a smile, said hi to everyone, and joined them. We were singing a hymn, all holding hands in a circle, when the TV flicked on. I thought someone bumped the remote, but then I saw a video of me with Tyler in the parking garage. My blood ran cold. Everyone stopped singing. The pastor's eyes went wide, and the church ladies gasped like they'd been slapped. The video was so clear that it was unbelievable. It was like it was shot on a high-definition camera. There was no mistaking it. My face was very visible in the video, plus I still had the same clothes on. I watched the video as our bodies tangled together in that dark corner. I wanted to disappear. I looked at Matt, and he was just staring at me, his face hard and unreadable. He suddenly stood up and said it was time for everyone to see me for what I truly was, a pretentious cheap hag. The room went dead quiet except for the video playing repeatedly. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The pastor and the others were frozen, like they couldn't believe sweet Chloe was capable of this. I wanted to scream that it wasn't all my fault, that I was unhappy, that I was trapped in a life that didn't feel like mine. But I didn't. I just stood there, my face hot, my hands shaking, while everyone stared at me like I was a stranger. The pastor finally mumbled something about needing to go. The others followed, grabbing their purses and avoiding my eyes. Matt didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the floor. Lily and Ethan were upstairs, thank God, but I knew they'd hear about this sooner or later. Small towns don't let secrets die. I tried to talk to Matt to explain, but he held up his hand and said he didn't want to hear it. He said he was done, that he'd tried to hold our family together for the kids, but he couldn't anymore. He told me to pack a bag and leave. I didn't know where to go. I grabbed some clothes, stuffed them in a duffel bag, and drove to a motel on the edge of town. I sat on the bed, staring at my phone, waiting for someone to call, to text, to say anything. Nobody did. Not Matt, not Jake, not Tyler, not even the church ladies who used to call me sweetheart. I was alone, and it hit me hard. I'd been lying for so long, hiding behind my smile and my choir robe, but now everyone knew. I couldn't charm my way out of this one. The next day, I went to work like nothing happened, but it was different. People whispered when I walked by, and my boss called me into her office. She said she'd heard rumors and asked if I was okay. I lied, said it was a misunderstanding, but I could tell she didn't believe me. I kept going to church too, because what else was I supposed to do? I sang in the choir, but nobody clapped for me anymore. The pastor avoided me, and the other members kept their distance. I felt like a ghost, like I was there, but nobody saw me. Not the real me, anyway. I tried calling Matt, but he wouldn't pick up. I texted him, begging to talk, saying I'd do anything to fix it. He didn't respond. I saw Lily and Ethan at school drop-off, and they barely looked at me. Ethan asked when I was coming home, and I didn't have an answer. I told them everything was fine, but they weren't stupid. They knew something was wrong. I wanted to tell them I was sorry, that I'd messed up, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just hugged them and pretended I had it together. I kept thinking about that video. I kept thinking about how Matt got it. Did someone from the mall tip him off, or did he hire someone to follow me? I didn't know, and it drove me crazy. I wanted to blame him, to say he pushed me to this by being distant, by not loving me enough. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I'd been cheating for years, long before things got bad with Matt. I'd chosen this over and over because it was easier than facing my life. I didn't stop either. Even after the video, even after Matt kicked me out, I kept texting Tyler. I told myself it was just to feel something, anything, besides the guilt eating me alive. We met up a few times, always out of town, always in secret. I was more careful now, using my secret phone, paying in cash, avoiding places where I might get caught. But it wasn't the same. The thrill was gone, replaced by this heavy, gnawing feeling in my chest. I'd look in the mirror and not recognize myself. Who was this woman sneaking around, lying to everyone, hurting her family? I kept going to church, hoping I could win people back. I smiled bigger, sang louder, and brought cookies to the potluck. But it didn't work. The whispers followed me everywhere. One Sunday, the pastor pulled me aside and said maybe I should take a break from the choir. He didn't say why, but I knew. I nodded and said I understood. But inside I was raging. How dare they judge me? They didn't know what it was like to feel so trapped, so invisible. But I didn't say that. I just walked away, head down, and went home to my empty motel room. I thought about leaving town, starting over somewhere new. But I couldn't leave Lily and Ethan. They were the only good thing in my life, even if I'd screwed it all up. I kept telling myself I could fix this, that I could talk to Matt, make him see I was sorry. But every time I tried, he shut me down. He said he was filing for divorce, that he wanted full custody of the kids. I cried, begged, and promised I'd change. He didn't care. He said I'd made my choice, and now I had to live with it. I'm still at the motel, living out of a bag, working my same job, going to church even though it feels like a punishment. I see my kids on weekends, but it's not the same. They're quiet now, like they don't trust me. I want to tell them everything, to explain why I did what I did, but how do you explain that to a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old? I keep thinking if I'd just been happier, if life hadn't been so hard, I wouldn't have done this. But I know that's not the whole truth. I chose this. I broke my family.